Hey, this episode is sponsored by the Praagh Spirit Team. Enjoy! Hey, it's Lauren here from the Praagh Spirit Team. Building a business can be overwhelming, but it doesn't have to be. Through ongoing training, online workshops, and monthly guest experts, the Spirit Team membership is a supportive community where entrepreneurs encourage and support each other while learning and becoming the best they can be. Put me on your team to keep you accountable, to help you reach your goals, and to cheer you on. Valued at $2,800 a month, yours for only $50 a month, and you can try it for 14 days for free. There's a link to the Spirit Team in the show notes. Hi, Lauren here from the Afterlight. Just a heads up that this episode originally aired on Facebook and Instagram. So if you hear references to that, just wanted to give you a little bit of context. Enjoy! Hey, it's Lauren. Thank you so much for listening to the Afterlight. Enjoy the episode. Hello. Hi, Facebook. Hi, Instagram. Lauren Grace here. I'm the host of the Afterlight, which is a new spiritual podcast aimed at talking about a whole bunch of subjects, such as near-death experiences, manifestation, healing, angels, mediumship, psychic development, things like that. The paranormal, just basically anything to do with energy and anything to do with, spirituality is kind of included on that podcast. So, every Thursday at 11:11, I have a new episode that goes live, and I'm showing up for you just as basically because I want to talk to you about these things, want to see what your comments are, want to share some of my perspectives, because very often, the perspective that we do get to hear is a lot about the guest. And sometimes I do interject my own stories and things of that nature, but I really wanted to get to know you as well and have you get to know me a little bit more too. So today what I wanted to talk about for about 10 or 15 minutes or so, I often get asked, what kind of journey did I go on to start my spiritual journey? What really sort of kicked me off? Was a lot of the books that I read that really sort of supported the kind of spiritual journey that I went on, and really got my mind thinking about all these other things, all these amazing possibilities basically. So there are so many transformative books. I don't know if you can hear that, but I live in Australia. I'm a Canadian living in Australia, and there's an amazing cacophony of birds outside. So if you hear some background noise, that's what's happening. It's about twilight now, and they tend to wake up around now, a little bit more active than usual. Anyway, getting back to the subject at hand. So I remember being a teenager, probably when I was in my late teens actually, and I remember having a fear of death. And that might resonate with you, or it might not. But for me, I remember feeling very afraid of death and very insecure about, that experience of not knowing that experience, obviously, but just being aware that was sort of the finality of, our human lives and where we were headed, basically. And so I don't actually recall how I came across this book. I think it probably watched an Oprah episode, honestly, and saw James Van Praagh on her show. That's just what's popped into my mind. So I think that's probably what started it. I hope that's true. But regardless, I remember that I read the book Talking to Heaven. And this isn't the original version of that book that I read, actually. And I actually haven't even read this book in a really long time. And, I was sort of hesitant to even talk about some of the books that really transformed my life today, because I actually feel like I need to reread a bunch of them. But I did want to share them with you because I thought that if you were interested in looking at, some new books to read, or if you had had a similar experience like I did with these books, that you might be feeling like you want to revisit them too. So anyway, Talking to Heaven, and it was basically this book where, James sort of recalled stories that he'd had talking to spirits who had passed over. And, I remember reading these stories and just being absolutely blown away by, the things that he was recounting, the experiences that he'd had. He had a story of somebody who called and gave a glowing reference for him. I think it was for him or somebody else, but I think it was for him, for a job. But that person who gave a glowing reference had passed before. And I just remember reading this book, and this whole world just slowly started to open up in front of my eyes. And I went, what? We don't die when we die. Like, we stay living, but in a different form. We're part of something bigger. There's something bigger happening. I had my first tarot deck when I was 13, so I think that there was probably some sort of inclination there that there was something going on. And we did go to church, when I was younger. Went to the United Church, really like free thinking sort of church. But I don't remember ever having the kind of confirmation in soul that we lived on. And that's one of the things that I definitely pay attention to in all of the reading that I do, or all of the guests that I have on the show. I pay attention to what feels right to me inside my body, inside my soul. It's not something that I, mentally go, yeah, that seems factual, and I tick it off or anything. It's something that I feel innately in myself as being the truth. And I would really strongly encourage you that if you're somebody who's kind of wondering, whether or not things are true or not, or, whether or not you should believe something, I really think that you should just trust yourself and your own intuition and your instinct on that. Okay, so Talking to Heaven, that was a big one. I'll just read like one little small page about that book so you can understand a little bit more about it. So basically said, this is a quote from James, and he goes, "If anything, these experiences make me realize that I'm not doing this stuff by myself. I know that indeed there are those spiritual beings, unseen and unknown, who work on our behalf to assist in bringing about changes in our lives. By helping me, my guides are helping all those that I touch." And so I love that. I love that book. I'm not going to read any more excerpts from that book because we have a lot more to say, and I've already been talking for 6 minutes somehow, so I'm not really sure how that happened. All right, the next book, I don't have a copy of it here, so that's a bit anticlimactic, isn't it? So the next book that I remember being a massive deal for me was the book Many Lives, Many Masters by Brian L. Weiss. I believe it's pronounced Weiss or Weiss. And basically he was talking about this, this beautiful woman who had all these ailments that came to him. He was a hypnotherapist, and she was basically saying that I have all these, fears, and a lot of these fears I don't understand, where they've come from, basically. So he proceeded to hypnotize her, and during those sessions, she recalled a whole bunch of past life experiences. And then she was also able to talk or share things of him that he didn't ever tell her, share experiences that he'd had in his life that she was basically getting from the masters. And, it really validated this experience for him, because before that, he was very scientific and he didn't really, know about this world. And then that really just opened up an entirely new experience for him. So Many Lives, Many Masters, I remember I read that book and I was gone. It was amazing. It was just a life-changing book. I'll read a little quote from that. So Brian, this is from his book, Many Lives, Many Masters. So it says, "Happiness is really rooted in simplicity. The tendency to excessiveness in thought and action diminishes happiness." And that to me means that, we live in a society where we desire for so much, or we're told to desire for so much, like the latest, greatest, or to accumulate things and stuff like that. And I believe that peace just comes from being peaceful and simple, and not, looking outside of you for, things to complete you. So that's what that sentence says to me. And that book was really profound and a life-changing experience. The next book that I remember making a huge impact on me was The Celestine Prophecy. And The Celestine Prophecy was really a lot about coincidences and energy, basically. And it's another one, confession time. I really haven't read it in a really long time, but I wanted to bring it up because it was really, important to me in my journey. So it basically talked a lot about energy exchanges with people, and also the coincidences that happen when you're connected. So I pulled a quote from the net because it's another book I seem to not have. It's when I moved to Australia from Canada, I left a lot of my books there. So these are definitely things that I realize now I need to rebuy and reread, because I'd be interested in hearing whether or not, or exploring for myself whether or not these books resonate in the same way. And I would think that they would, but I might have a different perspective on life than I did at the time when I was just getting into this journey. So the quote is, "When love first happens, the individuals are giving each other energy unconsciously, and both people feel buoyant and elated. That's the incredible high we call being in love. Unfortunately, once they expect this feeling to come from another person, they cut themselves off from the energy in the universe and begin to rely even more on the energy from each other. Only now there doesn't seem to be enough, and so they stop giving each other energy and fall back into their dramas in an attempt to control each other and force the other's energy their way." So that's a lot about, power exchanges that people have, especially in relation to energy. And it's funny because, we're kind of taught to look outside of us for happiness instead of within. And so we do sometimes tend to default on other people to make us happy, when really that needs to come from within. And then when it comes from within, no matter what happens in your outside circumstances, you can still roll with it, and you can still basically be okay, because your happiness isn't contingent on somebody else doing something or on a material thing or stuff like that. So that was a really good book. Another book that I really, really loved that was really powerful to me was the book called The Four Agreements, and that was by Don Ruiz Miguel. And that's a really small book, and I've owned it a few times, and every time I own it, I seem to find somebody who really needs it, and so I give it away. But basically, the Four Agreements, the whole idea of the book was that if you live by these four agreements, then you'll live the best life possible. So the four agreements are: be impeccable with your word, don't take anything personally, don't make assumptions, and always do your best. And your best changes every day. And it's a really small book. It's a book that you can read really quickly, and it's a book that I would recommend that you could even get your teenage kids to read. It's not difficult to read. There's lots of really important lessons within that book. And for me, there were a lot of aha moments that really just made me go, oh, I get it. And gave me, an option to look at the world in a different way and understand what was important. So those were actually all the books that came to mind when I thought about my early years and really getting into this journey. I know there were others, but those were some of the main books for me that really, changed my life. And then recently, in recent years, for me, it was the teachings of Eckhart Tolle's The Power of Now, which really changed my life. This whole book is basically covered in highlighting. His other book called A New Earth is another one. It's one of the most amazing books I've ever read, ever. And if you said, Lauren, you're stuck on an island, you've got 2 books that you can take with you only, what would they be? I would take these. They really are that good. And it just talks a lot about how, basically how all that is important is just being here in the moment and being now. And not worried about what happened or what's going to happen, and just understanding that your present position, your present moment is your point of power. So I just want to read an excerpt from that. This is from The Power of Now, which is his first book. All right, so it says, "When the compulsive striving away from the now ceases, the joy of being flows into everything you do. The moment your attention turns to the now, you feel a presence, a stillness, and a peace. You no longer depend on the future for fulfillment and satisfaction. You don't look to it for salvation. Therefore, you are not attached to the results. Neither failure nor success has the power to change your inner state of being. You have found the life under your life situation. So, basically, he's talking about how being now is just allowing you to not look to the future for fulfillment, and also just to experience life as it is in this moment without the distractions and the noise of our mind and the outside world, basically, because he's all about finding stillness. The other thing too, if you have read these books, I found this one at a bookshop. It's called Oneness with All Life, and it's inspirational selections from A New Earth. So if you are looking for a beautiful book, it's really beautiful. Yeah, check it out, Google it. The other thing too I will say is, if you are going to read The Power of Now, I really recommend that you do that. Start with that book and then move on to A New Earth. And Oprah and Eckhart actually did a whole YouTube series back in 2008 where they actually went through every chapter of A New Earth and discussed it. And real people like you and me called in and asked questions and really put the questions to Eckhart in ways that you might connect with if you don't understand some of the content in the book. So I would really recommend that you check that out. So that's on YouTube, but I'm also just finding for you here on my phone that they also have a podcast, which is based on the YouTube. It's exactly the YouTube, just in podcast form. So there you go, Facebook, that's what that looks like. And there you go, Instagram, that's what that looks like. So I would really strongly recommend that you consider, maybe reading a chapter of A New Earth, watching or listening to the podcast, coming back, reading chapter 2, chapter 3, and doing it like that, kind of like a course. Or you could just read it however you want, but I think that's pretty cool. And I've listened to that podcast so much because even though you hear the ideas and they might resonate with you, sometimes you forget and you need to be reminded. So that's it for today. I just wanted to share some of those top books with you because I do get asked about the reading that I do, and I thought I would share some of those. That's just the tip of the iceberg as far as inspirational books that I've read. So I'll definitely do another little segment on that sometime in the future, but that is for sure enough to get you started. I would love to hear though whether or not there's any books that I didn't mention that were important for you in your life. Please leave a comment below. I know that there's a lot of value to be found in books, and sometimes we just don't know. So please do share those books in the comments below. I'll be sure to check them out if I haven't already, and I'm sure that our listeners, our followers, people who are interested in this content would really appreciate it as well. Thank you so much. I'll talk to you very soon. Goodbye.
Hi, thanks so much for listening to the episode. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please leave us a review where you listen to your podcast and share it with your friends. Thank you. New episodes every Thursday.